Greetings and bienvenue, MITZU. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Want to know what it's like to experience the paranormal for your whole life? I mostly do this because I realized I can finally give out something to others about what I'm experiencing about the paranormal realm, including deceased people's ghosts, aliens, elementals, and so much more. I'll try my best to follow a chronological order, but we'll see about that later on. Oh, and also sorry if I make any grammar mistakes. English is not my native language. But before everything, a little background knowledge to all of you. I live in Europe, in a really crappy country near Austria, but that's not important here. Just a general idea where to place it on the map. As a straight consequence of the collapse of the Soviet Union, families around this area became highly toxic. I mean, alcoholic, abusive, and so on. Our family was not an exception to all of this. Both of our parents drank so wildly that my mom died of it on Christmas 2018. I also have one younger brother, and at this point in our lives, it's basically two of us as a family, and we have our differences. I mean, a lot. He also loves to disprove and ridicule the paranormal often. I think it's just a defensive mechanism to cope with the experiences. We are not rich, we are not poor, somewhere at the bottom of a middle-class family model, without parents and relatives, of course. I started to build an interest in the UFO subject really early on. Around the time I was 11 or 12, I had my first UFO magazine, because I saw a couple of shorter documentaries in the subject when it was aired on TV. I was fascinated, but I was afraid as well of the beings they portrayed as greys. I was so obsessed with this topic that all of my classmates from that time got really freaked out on me because I talked non-stop about this in class. I also remember that my teacher warned me once to stop this, as the others are basically terrified by the simple idea of a living, breathing alien. And showing them recreated photorealistic pictures of them from magazines is not helping either. Later on, I visited one of our relatives in a town, and as they needed to attend on a party, they thought, a good VHS movie will entertain me for the night. We went to find something for me, and although my relative tried to force some Whoopi Goldberg with a dinosaur detective movie, I fixed my eyes on a title called Intruders, showing a UFO hovering over a farmhouse. I wanted to see this movie so bad that I forced out every reason to my relatives about why we shouldn't get this one. After all that, I got it, and I've watched that masterpiece many times throughout the years. The movie was so realistic and ahead of its time regarding special effects that after watching that, I couldn't sleep properly for months actually, as something rang a bell deep inside me. Of course, I had the magazines, but that wasn't anything like that specific movie. Only after watching this did my memories and fear started to appear in my brain. I remembered that I had something weird going on when I was 4 or 5. My younger brother usually yelled in the middle of the night, gasping for air, with an intense terror in his little eyes. When we all ran to him to see what's going on, he just sat there in the bed looking ahead, truly terrified. Our parents, of course, tried to ask what's up, but he always said the same, "There are these big eyes and I can't sleep while they're watching." None of us can explain WTF happened, and it went on like this for months. At one time, he seemed to remember a memory in his dream, as we woke up to the sound of him, breathing heavily, moaning in pain. At this time, all of us was around his bed, and he started to tell, these little Lego things, oh my God, look over there! And he pointed up in the air behind us. We all checked what's up, but we couldn't find anything which could be slightly interesting. At that time, he already got out of the bed. When I asked angrily that, "What the hell are you talking about?" he just seemed to freeze in a rigid pose, opening his eyes like crazy, and just stared at me. I was so scared of him that I avoided that poor child for months. Around this time, he frequently had massive nosebleeds without any proper reason. He just sat somewhere, playing happily, then his nose started to run like hell. We never managed to determine what caused it, but around 10 or 12, it stopped suddenly. I also remembered from this time that I often woke up in the middle of the night to a high buzz. As my parents' room, and opposite of it, my grandma's room also had TVs, and remember these were the big old ones, I thought that they just left the TV turned on, so I went to turn every piece off. As we did not have a proper child's bedroom, the living room was our space, and we separated it from the rest of the rooms with a big, heavy, rusty-colored curtain. By the time I got up, it seemed that the high-pitched noise just filled my head. It was so annoying that I rushed to the curtain. I opened it just to see which TV made that noise. But here's the funny thing. All of a sudden, the high-pitched buzzing noise went silent, and none of the TVs were on. I was so confused that it started to annoy me. WTF did this noise? I went and explored every bit of the house. It was an old farmhouse, restored, of course, but couldn't find anything. I even went to the other part of the house, kitchen, to find something. But it was just my commitment to find the source. After approximately 20 to 30 minutes of unlucky searching, I went to bed angrily. Remember, when this actually happened, we were not exposed to any UFO stuff or whatsoever. We were just baffled. What actually happens here? I also remember the pure fear in my head when our electric air heater ventilator went off in the middle of the night. We were quite poor at that time, and my dad just hacked around the power box's measuring with a big-ass magnet. Therefore, we used a couple of those electric heater stuff because it was basically free. These things had like 6 modes, and 1 meant the least turned on time, while 6 was basically constant airflow. My parents turned it to option 3 or 4, and I was happily laying in bed when it was on. But when it turned on, I remembered the feeling that something's happening, and I became extremely terrorized. We also experienced weird other things throughout the years in this house. At one time, while we were deep sleeping at our parents' room, 4 of us in a single bed, we woke up to a loud crashing noise around the room's window. My dad quickly turned the lights on, and we saw an older middle-sized jar, and it just crashed into a flower pot located on the floor. The thing is, that specific jar was used to store coins, and it was located above our head in a normal-sized shelf. To hit the flower pot, it needed to fly above our head, through the bedroom, and hit the plant. We were quite baffled, but after a couple minutes of "what the hell was that?" from my father, we went to bed again. For a time, we had an almost normal period without any strange events, besides our parents' behavior, of course. We needed to move to our grandma's house, as our parents became extremely offensive towards each other. We moved in with my mother, and my father remained there. This is where we returned to age 11 and 12. Remembering all this from my childhood, I've decided to read everything which is related to them. Although I bought a lot of books and magazines, it felt lame and lazy, and I couldn't find what I was looking for, some purpose or reason for the things we experienced. After some family drama and to process our crappy childhood, we had to process a lot from these years, I became a black sheep type of thing. I started to listen to extreme metals and started to act. I'm deeply into the dark side of it, but in reality, it was all just for cowards, nothing else. Although I enjoyed the music, the ritualistic satanic BS never really got me. It was funny to start to experience again in our grandma's house, but this time it was not related to anything remotely similar to abductions, but more like a true paranormal happenings. Our grandma's house was a really old one, but located in a smaller city's center. At that same house, a couple of years prior, our granny's mother passed away due to old age and cancer. They really had a strong Catholic bond, and the old lady always forced us to pray and go to church whenever we visited them. So, at this house, we started to feel that something's off, but we realized it slowly, just seeing something for a short second, then nothing. Our constant feeling was that if you wanted to go to the toilet, you basically needed to go through the whole house to get there. The last room was the kitchen in this path, and no matter when we went to the toilet, we constantly felt that someone was watching us from the kitchen. I often heard small footsteps behind me, so I rushed to drop a pee and rushed back to our tiny room. We barely talked about this with my brother, but one particular night became extremely terrifying for both of us. It was around 99 or 2000, I don't know. It was almost summer, late spring. We went to our single beds and said goodnight to each other. Then I just wanted to sleep, but for a time I couldn't. Finally, when I felt that maybe I'm now starting to slip away, I heard a quiet and soft shh in the room. By the noises coming from my brother's bed, I knew he's still awake, so I said, "Ha ha, shh." My brother said, "Shh to you, asshole." And we started to argue about why the other is waking up the other in the middle of the night. We needed to understand that it seemed none of us made the shh noise. When we realized this, we rushed to turn on the lights, and for a few intense seconds we listened. But of course, there was nothing to hear anymore. We became so terrified that our PC and TV was turned on, and we couldn't sleep properly for weeks after that. At that time, I built a habit of internet searching. As I was scared, I wanted to kill time until the morning came, so it became a hobby, I guess. We moved from Grandma's house around 2006 to our father's home, as our mother started to date a gypsy guy and broke their marriage. As she became extremely alcoholic, the judges ordered my father to look after us. Of course, he was also a drinking bastard, but it was better in a way. For years, nothing really seemed to happen to us, or we just ignored all the crazy stuff, I don't know. We became WoW maniacs, playing all night long when the Burning Crusade released. Also started to pick up girls around my area and date a lot, so for a time it was silent. Of course, I was still interested in UFOs and other stuff, but I just ignored the topic purposely. Many years passed. I went to our capital to work as an IT guy, as I became one of them. I started to work at a shitty job with a narcissistic maniac as my boss, but for that time it was fine. Girls came and went, my landlord and I were good, so I became the assistant of that flat, meaning he doesn't give a damn who lives there as long as the rent was paid. So I decided who'll be my flatmate. Maybe it sounds silly, but for many landlords it's not a basic thing. It was around 2015 when one of my flatmate's friends came along. That mate smoked a lot of weed. He had tons of interesting friends, and this specific one, when he came around, started to chat about basically anything. By that time, I became pretty knowledgeable in this strange UFO field, but I was interested in the so-called abduction cases. What a coincidence, yeah? After a couple of hits, we surfed to the topic of the unknown, and I described a pretty materialistic view about the aliens topic. The guy listened to me, then said, "You know, you should meet with my girlfriend. She speaks a lot of similar things. Maybe she can tell you something new." As I was friendly, I approved, and next time the dude came along with his girlfriend, we started to chat. The girl immediately became very interested in the UFO field, but she described that she has more other experiences, which guides to meditation and spirituality. As I was extremely closed-minded to this topic, I refused to talk about it, but after a time she said, "What if I can prove to you that I can leave my body on purpose, and I can also tell you your physiological status as well, including diseases?" As I was totally skeptical, I said, "Sure thing, but let's make it a bit more official, shall we? Let's say you do this on this XY date, around 21 o'clock. I want my full physical status to be told." I didn't mention anything to her, although I had a couple of stuffs, broken bone, kidney stones, etc. And as you also stated that you can read minds in this state, I will think to very specific memory what you need to describe in full. I also want the chronological order about the happenings in the flat during your visit and the persons inside. The girl just nodded, and shortly after, the night ended. The day arrived, and I was instructed to lay on my bed around 21 o'clock when she arrived. Still highly skeptical, but did what she asked. Not 2 minutes passed, and I started to feel this slightly electric touch on my skin, like you can feel someone's touching you, but with a hint of electric feel. It felt like someone was touching my head in different parts. It started to warm up my chest, my right arm, my left leg, then felt like someone's touching my brain. I thought, this is the time for the memories, so I visualized the two scenes in my head. Then I felt my dog jump off the bed. He slept right next to me the whole time. Then shortly after, the feeling disappeared. As the agreement with the girl stated that she needs to write down everything on Facebook to me, I sat down at my PC after 10 minutes more additional relaxing. By that time, the girl had already started to type and already went through half of the things she experienced. She did everything I asked from her. The two specific memories were a fight between my parents and a scene with my ex, who was my deepest crush for the following years. She described them. She also mentioned that my right arm broke one time when I was little. It was also true, and any other thing was. Then she said, "And when your dog jumped off the bed, I left." Needless to say, to a materialistic guy like me, it was a shock. She also mentioned that she saw something in my left shin, but at that time, I didn't see anything on my skin, so I moved on. After that, I asked the girl to do that again, and she did, with new criteria, of course. When she finished with the second one, I asked, "How the actual hell you can do that?" Then she briefly responded with, "It all starts with meditation, training your mind to let go of your ego." As I was still skeptical, even though she demonstrated her capabilities to me, I started to research this topic. If one thing is sure of my thing is skepticism and restless research ability in order to find my answers. Although I found many strange things, the only thing I did not find is a short route to the so-called astral travel, as the girl named this ability as this. The only strange feeling I started to have is that aliens and spiritualism are somehow connected, but I was too closed-minded and materialistic to comprehend that, so I skipped this narrative. Not long after this, I started to practice meditation at home. I wanted this cool ability to observe everything from another perspective. I did not study any religious scripts at that time. I was still a metalhead on the outside, so it was a bit weird to me, but I had some success. Unfortunately, not the one I was hoped, but it was interesting as well. During meditation, I started to see my childhood room, in the middle of the night as I'm grabbing the edge of the curtains and gently squeezing it. But that's all. Nothing comes to me. It starts to annoy me, and as I dated a chick at that time who studied psychology asked me, "Why don't you try to reach this from another perspective? It seems as this event in your childhood had some meaning, but as it looks like halfway through your actual memory. Don't you think that that event has two separate memories? One where you reach for the curtain with the buzz in your head, and another one when the buzz is gone." The girl's thought just got stuck in my head so deeply that I've decided to try something in my next meditation. For that time, I became familiar with the concept, and I could easily slip into a deeply relaxed state. Here, I thought that I have a slight chance to see the whole memory in its core meaning, without any missing pieces. I went into this state in about 30 to 40 minutes. Then I imagined as I arrived at a really deep level in a base or something. I imagined the sinking into your consciousness as going down with an elevator. When I feel I'm deeply in the zone, I imagined that I'm slipping into this one core memory, with the curtain and buzz and all. I started to see the scene again when I'm grabbing the curtain, but after I opened the two-part, I saw nothing at first. But after my eyes adapted to the darkness, I spotted two figures standing right before me, just gazing at me, covering the exit door to the hallway. They looked kinda interested on my behavior, but did nothing at first. Then, they reached me, and the memory was gone. Again. I came out from the meditation and immediately reached out to the girl to tell what I had found. I tried to remember this scene for a longer period, but for several months, nothing came to me to continue this memory. As a side effect of the meditation and the changes on the structure of my mind, I experienced more and more weirdness. As I lived close to the city center, that area was pretty urbanic, but also contained a lot of history. Around World War II, the center of the city held several smaller gunfights, arrests, and so on, and I lived not far from a building which served as an interrogation building for the Communist Party. That area had strong and heavy memories, and it seemed those possible spirits started to find me. As I was still highly skeptical, I first ignored several events, but let's just recap what I've experienced through this era. Now, this is the time when everything went crazy in a short period of time. I had a couple of friends at that time who were interested in spiritualism, meditation, but had selective taste and did not follow any religious ways, although all of them had a belief system. They said to me, separately, that I have some purpose here, but I need to find out what that was. And I also have a strong connection to spiritual senses and powers, but I need to study and accept the possibilities. So the only major thing I did was to accept the possibility that there's something else, and not just strictly materialism. And so I did this, and everything went downhill. First, I started to see a dark hooded figure in the end of the corridor. This was a big flat with more than 96 square feet meters. The end of the corridor led to the exit door, and right in front of it, there was a big mirror, just to check yourself before you went into the urban jungle. I saw this figure often, but only from the corner of my eye. As I had a dog by that time, he also noticed something is off and often stared in the same direction where the figure standed right in front of the mirror. When I turned my head there, no matter how speed I was, it always disappeared. For a time, I thought my mind is screwing with me, and I just let it go. I constantly woke up at around 2 or 3 a.m. and felt that something was in the room. The air was colder in specific areas, and there was even a time when my girlfriend and my sleeping dog started to shake in their sleep. giving the same pathetic noises also. I woke them up 2 times, and the same thing happened. I also observed this black figure in close proximity 1 time. We were trying to sleep with that girlfriend, and she already fell asleep. As I'm a poor sleeper during the full moon, or close to full moon, I couldn't, so I stared at the ceiling in the half-moonshined room. This is when I started to see it again. So, it was around 1 or 2 a.m., I don't know, honestly. But one question, before I describe what I see: have you ever seen Bram Stoker's Dracula, with the scene where Dracula seems to hover through the air slightly above the ground, and he does these weird finger-pulsating gestures when he moves? Also, big shout-out to Gary Oldman, old-time favorite of mine. If not, try to search for it, just to have a reference. I stared at the ceiling, and from the right side curtain part, I saw a hand-like shadow slowly reaching out. I thought I was losing it, as I quickly looked there and nothing was there. So I've started to stare at the same spot on the ceiling. After a few seconds, it started to appear again. I looked again. It vanished. So I thought to myself, it seems this being cannot be seen if I try to directly look into it. Let's see what happens if I keep staring at the ceiling. So I did this. After a couple of tense seconds, the shadowy arm appeared again, but this time it slowly appeared in its full length, and its other arm. The arms connected to a heavily bent-over, human-like shape with, as I can translate it to myself, a hood and some dark clothes on it. It did the hand gesture type thing with its hands, while it slowly moved to the left side of the window, to the other part of the curtain, and it did it extremely slow, but when it reached the other side, it slightly sped up a bit. I was in complete shock. A bizarre, shadow-like entity crawled around the same room we tried to sleep. Of course, I woke up from the bed and went into the kitchen for some water. My girlfriend at the time slept so deeply that she didn't get a hint of the events. One time, we slept in the same room with that girlfriend, and I woke up 2 times. First time, I felt a heavy, really heavy, and slow breathing right next to our bed, but there was no space there, only a small one, where we usually put some water for the night in a plastic bottle. I turned to the wall and tried to ignore it and sleep, and although I was scared as F, I somehow managed to sleep. But the second time, it scared the crap out of me. I woke up to my girlfriend's heavy breathing, and when I turned over, I saw her laying on her back, her hands in the air, and looking like she was grabbing onto something. Then, she says in a static, almost radio-static mind-freak voice, "It was good, Anon. Keep on doing like that." So I freaked out from the room and tried to calm down. I went to the other room, my official room, and tried to think about what it was, but I was so nervous I couldn't think about anything. Another crazy experience we had when one of my friends showed up and asked for a shelter for the night, paying with beer, of course. So we slept with my next girlfriend in the 3rd room of that flat. During the night, when we were chatting and having fun, I placed my lighter on my desk, then turned to my friend, blah 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 blah. 10 minutes passed, and my cigarette died. So I turned again to pick up the lighter, but it was nowhere. "Where is the goddamn lighter, dude?" asked my friend, but he doesn't know anything about it. I started to search the room systematically, even in weird places, like behind the couch and so, but it disappeared completely. I started to get annoyed by that, but at that time, I researched the possible motives behind paranormal experiences like disappearing keys, lighters, and reappearing in another place. So I felt like something was trying to play a trick on me. So with this in mind, I had a sudden realization. Maybe something just hid the lighter from me and really tries to annoy me for the benefit of some negative feelings. I started to laugh and briefly explained my belief regarding this situation to my girlfriend and my friend, and as they did not handle me like I'm having a nuts, they said it's a possibility, and we looked for another lighter. Later on, when we moved to the other room to sleep, my girlfriend wanted to light up some of those tiny candles with aluminum covers around them. You know them. So she asked me, "Where is the lighter?" I said, "It's in the other room." So she silently went to the other room for it. At that time, I've heard an unbearable high-pitched noise, like when your ear is ringing, but much, much stronger. It came from the left, then went to the right ear, then slowly disappeared once my girlfriend returned. She looked at me with visible confusion and asked me, "Are you screwing with me right now?" I looked as confused as her, asked, "What?" Then she reached for something in the third room's desk and said, "Here's the lighter that you've searched for at the start of the night." For a brief moment, the air just became very cold around us, and I felt a deep and strong fear in me. I thought to myself, okay, there's two options here. One, we got so scared that we go into panic mode and we will have a panic attack or something, or two, I'll try to pretend like nothing happened here. So I went with option 2, and for like 5 or 6 hours, we had the most cheapest small talk in the history of mankind to avoid thinking on what happened. And this was just one case. Disappearing items was often observed, also cold spots in the flat, weird thought attacks, meaning sitting in total chill in your room, thinking about nothing. Then suddenly, you hear a high-pitched ringing noise coming from one side to the other. And after, you start to think like, you are worthless, you are nothing. So around that area, these happenings were quite usual. At this time, I had a strong idea in my mind about reincarnation and all. I've studied ancient Vedic texts, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and many other ancient belief systems, including ancient Sumerian and Egyptian as well. And I also came across Tesla's 369 rule, or the idea of zero-point generators, or the healing benefits of it, if you try to use it in spiritual ways. One day my girlfriend came home crying like hell. I was terrified and asked, "What's going on?" She pulled a medical report from her recent medical check, and it turned out she had a growing thyroid cancer. The size was approximately 1.2 centimeters, and as the report said, it's growing in size. She was completely wasted, and I couldn't say or do anything to chill her a bit. Suddenly, I had an idea, based on the stuff I've read about spiritual healing and all. So I asked her to allow me to touch her thyroid area with both of my palms. After that, I said nothing, but tried to visualize in myself that I'm healing her with greenish energy puffs, which looked like some sort of vape smoke or something. But I visualized it as it's going through her chest area and making her feel better. We went to sleep and forgot that this happened. A couple of days passed, and she needed to go to a secondary check to see if the record was right, and this examination contained a pee sample, blood and stool as well. I just did my usual thing, working and messing around, when I got a call from girlfriend. She cried again, but in a high-pitched, cute voice. She started to explain that the doc is confused, as he did find nothing at her thyroid area. The exam had taken so long due to the fact that the doc did not want to release her, as he was confused, WTF. It was the same doctor who examined her before, with several decades of experience and so. Not to mention the lab results as well. After this event, I contacted a childhood friend of mine who, strangely, built up an interest in spiritual healings and practices. Before that, I thought this guy was nuts or something, was always calm, friendly, and talked about a bunch of strange things. When I described the whole situation to him, he briefly said, "Yeah, because you possibly used your own life power to heal them. That's said to be a born gift, which is good. But if you continue to do this, eventually your life force will be gone and you'll probably die around 40 or 45. When I asked about some guidance, like where to study about this more, he replied, "Try to look into the meaning of Reiki, but Prananadi can also help. Your choice." After that, I tried to understand everything related to this topic. As I was asked before to be open to possibilities, I've tried to befriend with the idea that I maybe have some healing stuffs in me. After that, I got familiar with the basics and the procedure itself. I started to experiment on my girlfriend. As she had positive benefits, stronger hair, normalized blood pressure, balanced thyroid hormones, etc., I started to experiment on myself in the meantime, and I also felt that something is going on. And this is the time when we go back to the alien UFO thing. In this journey, I found a fascinating YouTube channel where there were 2 hosts, and each of their videos went for 1 hour in length, and they covered various topics in deep conversations, topics like UFOs, spirits, lost and found ancient spiritual knowledges and practices, and so on. Everything, of course, in a positive way. I contacted them, and to my utmost surprise, I found one of the guy's face in my old UFO magazines from 93 and 94, stating that he got his healing abilities from ET beings. He demonstrated a lot in that time, but I was unaware. So I thought to myself, this is the perfect opportunity to try something I've heard of, but did not have anything related to, until I've heard of Dr. Stephen M. Greer's CE5 protocol, where you basically vector down to Earth pointing to your location and pulsating a friendly message to any ETs who's interested. If they are, and if they want to communicate to you, there's a huge chance you can make contact. The guy demonstrated this with several high-quality footage, where they visited a remote area with a group of 40 to 60 people and started this meditation technique. I wanted to try this. So, after my girlfriend got better and I gathered these frames of information in my head, in 3 nights in a row I tried for some CE5. All the time I pulsated the same message. If there's a connection between you guys and my sudden realization of possible healing abilities, appear in the sky. Show yourself. Let me know that I'm not crazy. 3 nights in a row, nothing happened, besides the usual calm relaxation of meditation. Then, on the 4th night, one of my good friends came around and we had a couple of beers, talked about PC games and so on. At 22:30, suddenly, I felt as if I got drugged or something, as an enormous feeling of deep love formed inside me. I felt funny and sleepy a bit, and after several minutes of looking straight in the air, I asked my friend, "Tell me, mate, don't you feel something funny right now?" And he described the same thing to me. He became so frustrated that eventually he went home. My head started to buzz like hell, like someone connected some electrical wires inside my brain. My supposed location of my third eye rang like crazy, and it was overwhelming, to be honest. I sat down at my PC and started to write a letter. Then I suddenly had a thought in my head. Hey, how good it would be to just open the window to the right and check the night sky, right next to the building. So I got up and did that. When I opened the window and did what my thoughts said to do, my jaw just dropped. I saw 3 lights in the sky, forming a triangle. One of the lights was a bit bigger than the other ones, and it seemed stationary, while the other 2 seemed to move smoothly, changing the actual size of the triangle. I couldn't wipe the smile off my face. I just stared at these lights, mesmerized. I thought, I need to meditate now. Maybe here's a chance to communicate with them. So I dropped myself on the bed and started to deepen myself with meditation. After a short time, it appeared to me through my closed eyelids that a tall, glowing figure appeared at the end of my bed. It came along to the left side of my bed and reached for my hand and lifted me. For a couple of minutes, I felt like I'm flying above strange meadows with sunny areas. I see friendly chat between people and a generous feeling of love, dedicated to the feeling of alive. It felt like I had a journey through galaxies when I suddenly felt myself in my bed again. Then I saw the same figure at the end of the bed. He waved something with its right hand, strange hand gestures of some kind, then became stationary and slowly disappeared. I did not move for another 10 or 15 minutes after this. But afterwards, one of my flatmates at that time rushed to my room and yelled, "Yo dude, do you see that over there?" and pointed out the triangle in the sky. Then my other flatmate came home, did the same. "WTF is this, man?" Everybody's losing it at that time. Then my girlfriend came home and did the same. We've talked through the night. The triangle thing was still up in the air. As it was limited, who could see it? Later on, it disappeared from the previous spot, but after 15 mins of searching, we found it above the building. It was there until 4 a.m., I guess. I wanted to dive deep into the connections. It was 2017. I worked as an IT guy at a company. In the middle of the shift, in summer, I had a devastating phone call from my brother. Our grandma passed away. This is not the same grandma we moved to when I was around 11 or 12. This is the grandma we used to live together when the curtain incident happened due to a heart attack. She smoked a lot of cigarettes. We went to visit her old house, packed a couple of things. Had a filthy guilt feeling on me as we did not speak too much with that grandma, although she was pretty talkative about UFOs, ghosts, and had an open mind. Great chats we had when we had any. At that night, I saw her silhouette at her favorite chair at around 11 or 12 p.m., then never heard or seen anything regarding her. By this time, I had a couple of connections with spiritual healers whose word was, well, not maybe a holy scripture to me, but I often agreed with them, and they also taught me how to use healing methods. After a couple of months later, we got the news that my grandpa is really sick of rectal cancer. I had a chat with one of my friends, and then he said to me straight up, not joking, "Visit your grandpa as soon as possible. This is your last chance to talk with him. But you need to start with realizing that he is going to die. You must open this strongly truthful conversation, and this is the only way to do it." I took his advice and visited Grandpa. He looked tired, small, and broken through the decades, but for some reason he always greeted me with joy, mind the fact that he was a greedy asshole to others. I sat down and I asked my girlfriend, a different one this time, to talk to my grandma at any cost, as she always stole the show from Grandpa. I opened with the statement, "Grandpa, I came today to speak as you are possibly going to die." After that, a strong awakened stare lit up in his eyes and he stared straight at me. So I wanted to have a deep conversation with Grandpa. He was the one who always looked after me. He taught me to walk and talk, but my grandma, who's a narcissistic sociopath, ruined his whole life. He started to remember things, happened in the past. He revealed to me that one of the three of his child is not his really, as my grandma cheated in the past with a guy she had crush on, and that this girl of his, who's eventually my godmother and the one I've stayed and watched Intruders first, is not his, but he also revealed something strange as well. You see, Grandpa worked as a truck driver during the communist era, meaning he was free to cross borders basically anywhere, as he just went from A to B and bringing some heavy stuff along the way. It was a simple delivery job, but worth it, as they had a luxurious life because of that. Fancy wooden furniture, good-looking artistic stuff, and so on. During these delivery assignments, he recalled several incidents when he was driving on a road in the middle of the night. Then a huge light came and flew through the night sky, and then he woke up in the driver's seat of the truck and didn't know what the hell happened. Keep in mind, my grandpa was a strongly logical and dumbass man, never really interested in this topic, often calling anything similar bull and stuff. So he kind of looked lifted up a bit when he managed to tell me that he had not a single clue. YTF was those things he saw. He also revealed that some magical healing happened to my mum when she was 5 or 6. She got a mysterious fever from basically an unknown source and became so ill that the arriving doctor told my grandparents to prepare themselves, as my mother possibly would die that night. Then, they bought a ballerina dancer child dress, as my mother always loved them, dressed her up in that, and took a couple of photos while she danced around the house, on the top of the bed, and so on. Then the night passed, and my mother's sickness just magically disappeared without a trace. No one knew what happened. I saw those old photos a few times, but I'd swear to anything that's sacred that I saw some flashing orbs in the pictures. I also tried to heal Grandpa with my abilities, and as I was able to do this from a great distance also, I instructed him about what to do when I'm healing. For a time he started to become better and better, but after a time I felt as I'm just bouncing back from a rubber material. When I tried the healing, after several tries it was all the same, and I realized my grandpa is not interested in healing anymore. He just wants this to end soon. A couple of weeks passed and we got the call that he died in the hospital. My mum, who was with him at the time, told me that he was so far away in the end days, but for a couple of hours he seemed to be enlightened. His eyes popped up as he understood something, and he frequently wanted to see me to tell me something. I never had the chance to meet with him in the hospital, the worst guilt I've ever felt in my whole life. Unfortunately, my mother also went down the slide, as she started to drink so heavily that she even shat herself a couple of times. She collapsed at work, and by this time, I started to realize she's possibly playing out her last chance of changing. As I was pretty familiar now with the different forces like karma or destiny, I started to recognize the pattern in my life, but also in others, that these forces are trying to warn you from time to time to get yourself together. You don't need to believe in this, but I've experimented with this concept to see how it works eventually. I reached out to my mum and tried to warn her about the latest events in her life. If she was sober, she was that kind of alcoholic who always denied that she's an alcoholic. I tried to highlight that she had one last warning. Other possibilities opened for her, and it seemed, if she is willing to drop booze, her life finally becomes whole and wonderful again. She was lifted when we hung up the phone, and for weeks it seemed to work. But after that, she called me again, drunk, and tried to pretend that she's not drunk. I was so angry that after a brief chat I cancelled the call. She started to slip away again, and she called me after a 2 or 3 weeks period of massive drinking. It was around Christmas, and we had a phone call again at the beginning of December. As usual, she was so screwed up I couldn't even understand what she's saying. But anyways, I finished the call and went to bed. We were close to Christmas then, and had the usual end-year rush at my company. We worked so hard I hardly had time to eat. One of my mum's friends bothered me a lot, as she stated that she's knocking on my mother's door and she's not responding to the knocks, but she wants to get her screwdriver set from my mum, so can I ask her to pass it out or something? Sure thing, but my mum did not answer the phone. Whatever, she's possibly drunk again, just as usual. But after 9 days of no hearings from her, we got scared, but still managed to hush away that there's something wrong. Even counting the fact that one day at the job when I was alone, the office chair right next to me slowly turned, as someone just sat in it. On the night of the 14th of December 2018, I woke up to the sad sobbing of my girlfriend in her sleep. I woke her up and asked, "What's going on, honey? What's the matter?" She replied that she was in a small, dark and smoky room, and she was crying and she needed help, but nothing was there. And she was hopeless and felt an intense fear she never felt in her life, and so on. It was weird, and I feared something would happen, but eventually, after 2 hours of staring at the ceiling, I went to sleep. On the 15th, I went to work, and that annoying woman, my mum's friend, bothered me again with the same issue. I tried to call my mum again, but now her phone was turned off. We had an intense call with my brother, who suggested we send out a police car for a welfare check. A couple of hours later, my phone rang, and when I accepted the call, I heard a camera clicking, walkie-talkie talking in the background as comments in a strong report-style manner. A police officer told his name and told me that my mother passed away approximately 11 days prior due to smoke inhalation. They found out that my mother drank too much and swallowed a few pills as well, then left a burning cigarette on the couch and knocked out on the bed. The cigarette burned the couch's cover, the mattress and all, deep down until it reached the metal frame. When I asked, "How is it possible to not light up the whole building?" he replied, "The windows and doors were installed correctly, so the airflow was totally stopped here. The smoke remained in the room until we got here." He also stated that nothing is salvageable, as the biological infestation in the flat was so dense, everything must be destroyed. I leave it up to you to imagine a body in this state, and pair it with the fact that it's your mother, who was a drunk, but also your mother, and you tried your best to save her, but eventually she died. After that, everything went downhill. I've gained 15 kilos of fat, didn't sleep at all, had only one dream about my mother. With an unknown car, I arrived with an unknown driver to our old house, where my mother stepped out from the garden. She looked young and fresh, with a big, healthy smile on her face. She was possibly the same age as I at that time, which was weird. She came along and hugged me and asked for my forgiveness throughout the years. Believe me, she needed that. I said it's okay, and we went inside to see my grandpa, who was my mother's dad, of course. Upon arriving into his room, I saw him slip halfway on a basic wooden chest, almost like in a mummified state. He looked at me and said only, "Well, I think this is the end, isn't it?" But I just briefly said that stop joking around Grandpa, come on. When I woke up, I felt as if my mum just said goodbye to me and continued her journey. During this time, I had one strange occasion when I was playing Skyrim non-stop. It was noon, the weather was gloomy, as it was winter. It was bright out there, but you couldn't locate the sun. You know, this typical winter day. I remember I felt suddenly as I'm in the middle of a big bubble, where all the sounds just became really quiet. My dog snoring, the PC, the game, everything. I felt as if my eardrums are under some form of pressure, like you are traveling up and down on mountains and you feel the pressure differences. I felt dizzy and disoriented, and I lost the feel of time. I don't know how long this went, but when I looked back to my screen, to my shock, the stealth archer of mine was standing in a totally different area than where I left it. At my deepest shock about what the hell happened here with my game, I couldn't find any logical explanation to it, so I went on an adventure again. After processing the loss in my head for a while, I started to meditate more and tried to find someone who can do a hypnotic session on me, because throughout the years, I had so many unexplainable situations that I wanted to find some answers, mostly from my childhood. But during the years when I lived with the weed lover guy, we also had strange experiences, as he was obsessed with aliens, but he often called them names and so on. You know, in a form of old man yelling at clouds, Simpsons style. So, eventually I came across a guy who said is an expert in meditation and has been doing it now for several years. He specialized in traveling back to previous lives and had no other cases where someone stated something about possible ET visitations. He was a bit skeptical, but positive, so he agreed to have a session with me. For me, hypnosis did not work as I thought it would. Basically, my mind said out loud the correct answers to the questions. I thought it was like 20 or 25 minutes, but in reality, I became hypnotized for 1 hour and 48 minutes, and I revealed a lot to him. First, to understand his method, what he used. We went back in time to different parts of my life, where I felt something is funny or strange. The dates were picked by me, and we used a reverse chronological order, basically. As a last point of interest, I picked up the date when I experienced the curtain thing. We had this. The guy, who was a weed smoker, had terrible rages and panic attacks often. I recalled 2 events now, when some taller, dark greyish alien being visited our flat, but they came for the dude, and not for me. I woke up one day to a disturbing feeling like something is off. I turned around the bed, and I saw this figure, dressed in black, turtleneck jumpsuit type of clothing, staring straight at me. There was something menacing in its eyes, but we just kept staring at each other. Then, I heard a voice in my head. "There's nothing to see here. You are really sleepy." This thing also ordered me to go to sleep, so I went to turn back to the other side of the bed and fell asleep. We've also found out the reason for the Skyrim bug and timeless bubble feeling, by what we recorded at that session when the time slowed down and I felt this strange feeling. A small being with pale white skin walked into the room like it was home or something, then looked at me and said, "These are hard times for you, but you will eventually benefit from all of this. But now you need to stay strong and survive this time." I also had the feeling that he said other things as well, but I couldn't recollect, even in this state. Then it walked out of the room, and as a distraction, unconsciously, I distracted myself after the event with a sudden new happening to look into. As I found out later, this technique is often registered in the reports of so-called truthful witness testimonies. We couldn't find any points of interest in a lot of dates, but when we reached the age 5 era, the short movie about the 2 figures in the living room continued. As they reached me, I grabbed their hand. I remember I was happy and excited about what was going to happen here. We walked through the walls until we ended up in the garden. We had 2 gardens back then, one where the dog played and guarded the house, and one back, fortified with gates and all, where a mini-hill also could be located. There was a small passage at this mini-hill, which led up until the highest point. The 2 beings just held my hands and walked me to this area, and we started to cross the passage. I remember the grass was a bit longer and was a bit wet, so I slipped a bit, but the being on the left got me until I gathered my balance. We walked through the way, and there was a big, bright object parking at the top of this mini-hill. A small ramp could be under my feet because I felt small, round-shaped bumps. Inside, there were 4 other beings, and it seemed as if they were just waiting for me. Then they formed a circle around me, all 6 of them, and each one of them placed their left hand on the top of my head. I only felt as if something was just filling me up with, how should I call it? Light. Like you are an empty bottle, and liquid light just fills your entire body. That's the closest I can describe it. After that, I can only recall going down in the mini-hill with one of the beings. He placed me right just the other side of our big, rusty-colored curtain. We also found out what my brother's nightmare was about. The first one, where he described the big eyes staring at him constantly, was a possible indicator that he had experiences as well, but he never really processed it. The one incident, what he recalled during sleep, about the Lego thing, has also been found out. It was 1 or 2 years after this curtain event. It was Christmas, and we had a big open box filled with Lego parts, figures, different sizes of semi-built stuff, and so on. My brother just sat on the floor, placed the box in front of him, and started to assemble it. I went out, as I loved snow, and it was a crazy amount that year. I investigated the back garden as I've found some funny footprints in it. I couldn't say what it was, although farmhouse animals were not unknown to me. I even rode a pig once, but nothing could be seen anywhere else, just a couple short footsteps from the back of the garden to the house. I left it there, went back inside, and found my brother playing with Lego. I joined him, sat down on the floor and started the same. After a while, my brother pointed behind me and shouted, "Woo, look over there!" When I looked, the same figure stood there who visited me shortly after my mum's passing. I jumped up from the floor, looked back at my brother, but he seemed to be frozen, with the same expression on his face. I looked back to this being, who just stood there and looking at me. He placed his left hand on the top of my head again, and I felt the same light-filling feeling. It was like splashing into a wave of light. When I opened my eyes, I saw my brother playing with Lego figures without any problems whatsoever. There was not a single sign that something happened there, and I quickly began to play as well. When we reached this era, an unexpected memory came into light as I spontaneously started to recall one incident when I was 3 years old. This is kind of creepy, but I remember everything from the age of 3. At that time, we lived in an area where tourism was great due to a near mini lake. My father worked there as a waiter, and my mum was pregnant with my brother. One summer night, I played outside at the corner of the building with my 1989 Keaton-style Batman figure. I saw it for a few times by then, due to my father, and I had one of those action figures. It was getting dark, and the building had a small garden area with a few trees, bushes, a few desks and chairs and so on. It was located to my right. While I was playing with my figure, I've noticed a small figure walking to me slowly, then stopped right next to me and said nothing for a while. Then it asked, "What are you doing?" I replied, "I'm playing that Batman is out from the Batcave and is going to fight against bad guys." "Oh," it replied. "Then place Batman back into the Batcave," which was the rainwater collector's mouth, "then follow me and have a little chat." I pushed Batman into the cave, got up, and followed the figure who was, this time, taller than me. While we were walking slowly in the small garden area, it looked straight into my eyes and started to say, "You possibly don't know it yet, but you are a really special kind of child, but your parents possibly know that already. I wanted to inform you that we will see each other many times in the future." After that, the hypnosis session ended, and I've returned from the memories. The guy was shocked by what I told him, and since then, he has developed a strong interest in this field. Since then, we usually discuss several topics together and we try to see all possible answers to a case, not just the paranormal one. It has worked for years now. In the meantime, I started to ask people who claim to have some research or interest in different areas, tarot reading or energetic healing, astrological calculations, Scandinavian rune magic user, shaman, etc., to tell me who I am. After all, I experienced the following. For some reason, my grandpa, my mother, based on some hints from Mom and his dad, my brother and me are affected in some sort of rogue-like operation, where the visitations was just pure information share and energetic sessions. I also connected the point that when this happened frequently, I had the worst headaches of my life. My teacher needed to send me home. Nothing helped, basically. Nobody ever knew what was that, but I think these little fellas just overdosed me or something. Also, for some reason, these ghost beings, elementals and so on, are also trying to seek my attention, and I wanted to know why. So, besides these people, I went to meditation group sessions with the topic of previous lives. Of course, I still had huge skepticism in me, so I did not share my findings with these people. I wanted them to say what they see about me. Separately, all the people who became trustworthy and truthful said the same about me. They feel something funny about my duty here on Earth, but they also see that I have a strong connection somehow through the third eye and can also detect other people's feelings and thoughts. They state that I was ordered here on Earth a long time ago to help others with healing and communication. For a time, I just stored these reviews about me and tried to focus on meditation and hypnosis. One of those meditation sessions was strongly about the idea of forgotten past lives. So I went and tried my best to remember something. In this session, I saw myself looking into the mirror, but my reflection was not a human one. It was more like the beings I've encountered in my whole life. I looked at my left, then the right side of my face, and I realized I'm looking into a mirror. Then, I turned and entered a long room with a short ceiling. There was some kind of a desk on the right, and the left wall was a complete glass one. Through it, I saw the surface of, what I think, the moon. I was a bit surprised, but eventually I stepped closer to two other beings who already stood there. They just nodded and escorted me to a single bed type of thing. helped me to lay down, and they started to look at me. One of them said something like, "Your duty is to go down there and help them. Tell them that there's a way that we can help." I nodded and felt myself inside a vortex. Then I woke up from the meditation and felt quite shocked. Although I still had harsh feelings toward these ideas, I left these infos for a couple of months, written down only in texts, stored on my PC. Later that year, I found a guy on YouTube, a Canadian old man, who had 3 videos of him talking about his ET encounters and experiences. Several key moments in his description left me feeling funny, as somehow I saw these events with my own eyes. But one part, where he describes a past life memory, truly frightened me, as this guy basically told the very same thing that I experienced earlier. I later contacted him and had a couple of lovely chats on this topic. As he was the first one who actually heard about my vision, he was amazed how the 2 stories ring a similar bell. So it seems they're doing something with my family, but I still can't figure out the message they've given to me. So, what have I experienced throughout the years? What do I understand from these times? I had the opportunity to talk to others who had experiences from around the same age as I had. Not a single one of the encounters, including mine, contained any form of picking, needling, operating stuff where the aliens are probing your ass. What I've heard from others is that for a bigger group of individuals, they're trying to plant information in our subconscious mind and also trying to teach us about how to help others and ourselves. It seems that ghosts, meaning deceased person's ghost, are basically trapped here due to their sticky behavior to the physical realm, as they don't want to let go of their past lives. They cannot produce negative energy. Your body does that, and mostly your brain, which is important because of the duality of our 3D realm. So they always seek out to gather this energy, and they get it from still breathing living human beings. They're not evil, they're just trapped. Of course, as I understand it, there are negative astral beings as well. Call them as you want. You can also interact with them, but it's not your best shot, I guess. It seems the individuals who have stronger third eye functioning are often gathered by these lonely spirits, as it shows as a beacon to them. But I think the dark figure that I saw when my girlfriend slept, the shadow figure thing, was more likely an elemental. These things can be summoned by someone who has knowledge on it, or by simply releasing the same type of energy around the same area for a longer period of time. The dark figures, I think, were beings like that, as I had 2 separated feels to the shadow people I saw there. I made these posts only for the purpose of highlighting some things, maybe. I remain in the shadows, but I thought it would be interesting to you all if you could peek into a life you may never have heard of. And believe me, it's not rare. Keep safe. Oh, and P.S. It's your right to talk shit about my writings. It's up to you. But what I've experienced, it turned me from a strong-headed asshole with no spiritual interest to a person who is, well, not perfect, but tries to do so and help others. You also don't need to worry that you would talk to anyone similar to me. For the first sign of bullying and bullshitting from a random person, we usually cancel all communication to the person. But there are cases when you just have an instant connection to a stranger and have a strong discussion on this topic. I'm also an educated engineer, close to 40 now. I went to several psychologists during my life, went from doctor to doctor, and couldn't find any physical or mental illnesses. My belief system is not strong because I figured out to myself by creating alternative realities. First the experiences came, and after that I went and tried to find some answers. If any person who has similar experiences read this and felt alone ever, just remember that it seems there are a lot of similar weirdos around our globe. Hopefully, we will find out what is the greater purpose of our lives. But until that happens, you can call me Tinfoil Hat Bob or anything similar. Also, throughout the years, I felt so often that this is not some blessing type of thing, but more of a curse, where you always need to help and help, because that's your job. But I guess this is it. Keep safe for the weekend, guys. Now it's much better that I wrote this out of me, in one piece.
Quick reply because I'm in a hurry, but I'm in the same train was the man of science for a long time, until a few years ago my eyes got opened, and I started to search for the truth. The truth came to me just recently via experience I lived through. The greater purpose is, believe it or not, whatever you want to make from it. This is your dream, and none of it is real. Not you, not me, and neither is the whole world. It's literally just a dream you, as the source, is having. This is you explaining this to yourself, as stupid as it sounds. This is the truth behind all, and it was shown to me by the source, and it was a deeply touching experience. Not sure if you wanted to hear something else, but got a feeling that I was reading your thread for a reason. Maybe that reason being that I need to tell you what's up. So go on, have an amazing life and live without fear, experiencing everything imaginable and beyond.
I have had a strong feeling for a long time now that everything here is a simulation. Not because of Elon Musk, but more like Tesla, Philip K. Dick, and many others. Many photon-related experiments proved the same. Double-slit experiment, if I recall it correctly. I have no premeditated answer I want to see here. I'm generally happy if I see a reply like yours. Strange, how the true skeptics usually become the biggest believers, isn't it? And thanks for the kind words. I'm not afraid anymore. I had more encounters through the years and many more strange dreams, but let's just put it aside now.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more Greentext will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.